You are listening to the podcast of the Mathias Corvinus Collegium, the largest talent management institute in Hungary. If you want to know more about our mission, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels. For interesting articles and analysis of our professors, external contributors, and students, look up our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.
Welcome everyone. It is the podcast episode of MCC Learning Institute. My name is Richard Fodor and I'm head of research at this institution. And today we have an esteemed guest, Dr. Tate, a historian who has worked for many years at a senior level in education in a range of countries. He was chief executive of England's national body responsible for school curriculum and testing from 1994 to 2000, and he was a chief advisor to secretaries of state for education from both political parties. From 2003 to 2011, he was Director General of the International School of Geneva, a bilingual school with more than 4,000 students. He became involved with the International Baccalaureate during this period and remaining a member of its board and chair of its education committee until 2015. And Nick, you have just published some years ago The Conservative Case in Education, and you have just been working on a new book, which is expected to be published this year. The listeners will get it as well. And we also have Dr. János Setényi, director of MCC Learning Institute, who has also been an education consultant with long decades of experience. Let's first of all talk about today's gala, because we have just had a joint gala in Budapest dedicated to MCC's new ranking league table, initiated by Mathias Corvinus Collegium and the Hungarian Authority of Education. What were your impressions and experience today in connection with that?
I found it very impressive seeing heads coming to Budapest from all over the country, receiving the congratulations of a large audience on their achievements. Heads work incredibly hard, very long hours, and have a stressful job. I know I've done it myself. And they're often not praised and congratulated and rewarded. And it was really good and heartwarming to see so many people come up, receive their certificates and receive the applause of the audience. And of course, they're just the tip of the iceberg, because below them are their staff, their teachers above all, but also their non-teaching staff who play a big role in schools, and the people who do all the work, the pupils who've achieved these splendid results. And they will pass on the heads when they go back the congratulations to what has been a team effort in their school. So that was very rewarding. And I think it's very important to do this sort of thing. I gather it's the first time that it's happened in Hungary. It's good to celebrate achievements. You can be a good school without being part of the top 100 schools who meet the various criteria that lead to this award. But it's good that those who have met the very highest standards are singled out and praised, because it's an incentive to them and to other schools to continue working hard to achieve similar achievements. And it's an incentive to others to try and get in that top league at some point themselves.
Thank you. János, what would you focus on about today's events?
Well, it was a very nice gala, a celebration of teachers and educators, all in all. I was very satisfied with that. And when I saw these 100 schools, I thought that these are small lamps in Europe where the students still read Shakespeare and Homer. For sure, because of the national core curriculum. So these are pillars of European civilization, and I hope it will continue in the future. The Learning Institute will develop this ranking list, and the next year we will have an even better one. I want to develop it in two other areas. One is the value-added thing, which measures the entrance level and the output, and compares the two, which tells a lot about the real impact of the school. Not only this meritocratic hardcore indicators, and the other is very hard to measure. The other area, this is the soft area, this is the school climate, team spirit, the ethos of the school. But obviously we will make a small progress in this area as well. I think these three things, the hard studies, this ethos and this spirit of the school, and this added value constitute a real good grammar school. Also, we are also thinking about vocational schools. Now, we have this German continental tradition of good vocational education with structured and focused schools. But that's, as we say in Hungarian, is the music of the future.
Thank you very much. I cannot miss the chance to ask you about the national curriculum, because you were involved in the introduction of it. Up until the end of the 20th century, England did not have a national curriculum, and it was Lord Kenneth Baker and Margaret Thatcher who not only promised but delivered the first national curriculum for England. And Nicholas, you were the leader of the Curriculum Council during the reform. How did it go? And could you please give us some insights into the steps of reforming national curriculum?
It was a very important and necessary move, because responsibility for the curriculum had been delegated to local authorities and individual schools, and some did it well and some did it very, very badly indeed. And the evidence was accumulating that perhaps the majority were not doing it very well, and as a result, levels of attainment, even in basic areas like mathematics and English, were falling. So the curriculum was brought in to re-establish these standards. The initial curriculum was extremely ambitious, and the mistake was made of setting up largely separate subject groups and not giving them sufficient guidance as far as the amount of area that they were supposed to cover, with the result that when the curriculum emerged, it was far too big and unmanageable, in particular in primary schools, and primary teachers found it pretty impossible to manage, and it had harmful effects on the basics of English and maths. Their attention was distracted from what they should have been giving priority to. So it had to be fairly quickly revised. The problem then was that some of the things that were really good in it got squeezed out. And it was about on the third or fourth iteration that we finally realized what the appropriate balance was between prescription and freedom. On the one hand, the national curriculum can be over-prescriptive, can be burdensome to schools, can limit teachers' creativity. On the other hand, it can be so lacking in detail that it opens up all the problems that we'd had before the curriculum came in for teachers and local authorities to not meet some of the major objectives that the government had set for the school system. So it's taken quite a long time. The other problem is that every time we have a new Secretary of State, he or she decides they want to revise it, which is not really a sensible way of proceeding. There has to be, to some extent, a system by which this is partly, at least partly, above party, and can continue undisturbed to some extent whenever there's a change in government.
Well, I was smiling in the meantime because we have a longer, here in Hungary, a longer tradition of national curriculum. It was set up by the Habsburg and the Jesuits in the 18th century, the first national curriculum. However, when I was listening to Nicholas, I thought that he was talking about the latest Hungarian curriculum reform, because obviously we make all these mistakes again and again. But indeed, it's about a balance. It's very hard to find a balance, because the disciplinary and subject-based tribes are very aggressive, and they truly, it is not just about interest conflicts, they truly believe in their special mission on planet Earth, and they want to consume all the teaching time. The scarce resource is the teaching time. They're competing for the teaching because you can't keep the children endlessly in the school. You must finish a school day sometime in the afternoon. So the scarce resource is the teaching time. They're competing for the teaching time, and music is obviously as important as physics. And now you can imagine these disciplinary wars. And sometimes we pump up the curriculum, the content thing, and over-regulate. Sometimes we squeeze down, but then it is sometimes collapsing as well. So it's all about balance. And my question is that how do you wish or to find this balance? Do you need some enlightened, wise people on the top of the reform, or you don't have this kind of illusions, Nick, anymore? So yeah,
I think having done it a number of times in England, we got a fairly good idea how much a particular subject ought to be given, and therefore the remit that's given to a subject working group ought to be a realistic one, and there ought to be an overarching group with representatives from the different subject groups which can veto things that are not possible. And it's best that it's done that way rather than ending up on the minister's desk, which is how it did the first time we did it. And that led to all sorts of political decisions which were contentious and brought at times the whole process into disrepute. So very strict remit based on experience, plus an overarching group that keeps an oversight of the whole process.
Thank you. As we have mentioned, you have also published a book dedicated to conservative ideas of education. Related to this, how should a conservative curriculum look like, and what kind of aspects should be taken into consideration when planning?
A conservative curriculum should essentially be concerned with transmission of what I've often called the major languages of human understanding, mathematics, sciences, history, literature, the arts, so that, and study of societies, that can be linked to history, it can be separate. Those are the main things. That should be the core of the curriculum, together with all the skills and the attitudes and the qualities of mind that those subjects, in their many different ways, promote. We don't need separate courses on skills. The skills are intrinsic to the subjects if the subjects are taught in such a way that it's true to their identity as a subject. And that's why my very strong preference is for disciplines rather than interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary study. That's absolutely essential at a later stage. It may be in the last 2 years of schooling that we have some of that. It's certainly essential at university, given the nature of knowledge and the world that we live in. But in secondary schools, for most of the time, it's very important to base your work on tried on disciplines that have stood the test of time, and over the years have proved to a very good basis for a broad liberal education for everybody.
I fully agree, and I would take these wonderful ideas word by word as a recipe, and we will represent it in the next round of curriculum issues in Hungary. What I would like to emphasize is the challenge of a curriculum policy, not the political ones, because in Hungary we don't have that too much, this gender things or anti-colonialism. We don't have that. The other one is when politicians think that modern education systems are like an aspirin, which a school can solve all kinds of problems like drug prevention, ethical education, sexual enlightenment, entrepreneurship, and so on and so on and so on. I can tell you thousands of issues, and they try to pump these issues into the curriculum. Sometimes new little disciplines are born, which with a number of like 1 hour per week, which is an aborted thing in itself. Sometimes they pump it as a content into the traditional disciplines, and it's very, very hard to create an umbrella which protects this conservative curriculum. That's a dilemma, and this dilemma exists in Hungary too. We are part of the world, of course, in this respect.
It requires extreme ruthlessness on the part of the head of whatever curriculum agency one has, and equal ruthlessness on the part of the minister in charge of education, who is being battered down all the time by his or her colleagues demanding a bit of the curriculum for their particular interest. When I was chief executive of England's curriculum agency, every week there was some demand for financial literacy, preparation for motherhood. There was a crisis about children being born to mothers who are over the age of 35. Therefore, it was suggested that this might be added to the curriculum. Dental decay, the fact that the government was unable to provide an adequate supply of dentists led to pressure on the government to make sure that children were taught how to brush their teeth. Endless things, and the pressure was utterly relentless. And only by being ruthless and dictatorial and having a minister who was similarly supportive was it possible to stem the tide of this. I'm afraid, though, the tide has washed over schools, and schools at the moment are massively distracted from the core business of following a curriculum by having to deal with relationship education, social and emotional learning, lots of things that in the past were not deemed to be the role of a school because they were deemed properly to be the role of parents and really need to be put back into the hands of parents.
What I do in the frame of this Learning Institute is that whenever we are on the field, in the countryside, elsewhere in Hungarian cities, around the country, we make wonderful presentations where we urge the teacher to reject this kind of therapeutic roles when they are obliged to heal the obviously family-based problem or social problems instead of providing the classic school-based education. And let's say 5 years ago, the reaction was a big silence and some thinking. Now more and more people give a positive feedback about that. So this clarification of the school's mission and delegating the responsibility for upbringing a child back to families, whatever it means in modern age, family, of course. That's an obvious thing, but that sometimes seemed to be a revolutionary act in this country too, and we will go along this road in the future as well.
Nicholas, you have mentioned a list of languages to human understanding or the heritage of humanity. Let's focus for a bit on history education because it basically became a battlefield or battleground in Europe. What do you think about the role of history education in the 21st century?
I think it's absolutely crucial in a world that is changing very fast to understand where we have come from and thus to understand who we are. I'm extremely concerned at the lack of a sense of roots on the part of many young people, and along with that goes in many cases a lack of a sense of belonging to a community, both a local community and a national community. And I think the world is a stronger place where people do belong to communities, feel that they are members of that community and have a duty and a responsibility towards it to support its continuation into the future. And that's both at local and national levels. And it's therefore very important indeed that as part of a conservative education, there is a very strong transmission of a sense of the past of the country, the past of Western civilization, and to do so not in such a way that says that everything was marvellous, in a way that that is factual and truthful and shows things that were bad as well as things that were good, but not one that is deliberately designed, as often in some Western countries today, not Hungary, I know, to make people feel uncomfortable about their country, to feel that their country has been the source of bad things and to want to apologise for it. We need people to go out feeling proud of the things that they ought to feel proud of in their country without having a overly patriotic or xenophobic or whatever curriculum, but one that simply lays it before them, the good and the bad, and lets them see where they have come from and what their roots are in the various societies that have existed in their country in the past. I do think it's a very, very important subject in the curriculum. I'm dismayed at the low priority it's often given in some countries. I know, again, not in Hungary, but in my country, it in effect becomes optional at the age of 14, at a time when it's really crucial, as people are moving towards feeling that they can participate in their community, not to be still learning about their history. So I'm pushing very hard for it becoming not just an important element, but a more important element than it has been.
Let me reflect to this from a British point of view, since not as a Hungarian speaker. One of my favorite philosophical essays from José Ortega y Gasset, it's translated to Hungarian. España desespinada, the spineless Spain, is the name of the essay. When Ortega is describing Spain as a country which had a global mission, which was the spread of Christianity and Western civilization in the Americas, especially in Central and Latin America. And whilst this mission was emptied or fulfilled, implemented, Spain was unable to find a new global mission, and the great power as a country became meaningless. According to Ortega, the country can be managed still as a modern Spain very well in a pragmatic way. It can have good times or economic progress. It was written in the 30s, I guess. But as a country for the humanity, it has become meaningless. And if Spain was one of these founder of Western civilization on a global scale, the British Empire was the perfect machinery to settle everywhere, Western civilization all over the planet. So most of the people on this planet have some sporadic ideas about parliamentary elections, representation, legal services, private property, and things like that. That is the direct outcome of the British Empire. And as a Hungarian observer, to see that this heritage and this transmission, global mission, is challenged and questioned and criticized, that's very surprising. And my question is, from the point of history teaching, that following the idea of José Ortega, that did UK become meaningless?
The UK, in my opinion, has not become meaningless. Because, as you say, it has been the basis of the spread of a whole variety of freedoms and political practices, which, for all their faults, have brought great benefits to the world and can contribute in the future to the well-being of the world. And that is why it has been so depressing in recent years, especially in North America, which is above all the inheritor of that British tradition, to find so many schools moving over to the 1619 project, which rewrites the history of America based on the time that the first black slaves arrived on the continent. Everything else, it becomes insignificant. All the amazing achievements of the American Constitution, whatever one thinks about American politics, the American Constitution is the most extraordinary achievement, and it is based in all all sorts of ways on the traditions in England going back to Magna Carta and even beyond. And I very much welcome the determination of the new regime in America to make sure that the 16 to 19 project is not the basis for history teaching in American schools, and that a pride in that inheritance from England is carried forward in the future. And we in England as well need to do the same. At the moment, I'm afraid we are still decolonizing our curriculum. If that means telling people about some of the bad things that happened during the empire, fine. I'm perfectly happy with this. But if it means giving the impression that everything we've done is oppress other people and we need to do penance today about it, first of all, it turns into victims all those people in our country who've come from the colonies who don't feel to be victims. Why should they be made to feel victims? And it turns the white majority into the feeling that they're oppressors when there's no reason why they should be deemed to be oppressors. And so it's deeply damaging to society, and a good history ought to have a major role to play in trying to bring together the different sections of current UK population.
Dr. Nicholas Tate, Dr. János Setényi, thank you very much for your insights. And dear listeners, thank you very much for your attention. Please follow our channels and our websites. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this MCC podcast episode. For further media content, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to read more by our professors, external contributors, and students, check out our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.